Inadequacy and fallacy of Newton's 3 laws and 1 hypothesis. The Newton laws and hypothesis seems to be a master statement of nature's underlying principles. They have held their prestige with reverence for their validity for 300 years, during which time the misconception that all matter attracts all other matter with mathematically measurable power has been a fundamental of scientific thinking. New enlightenment as to God's ways and processes will demonstrate that this belief is but one more of the many seemingly obvious facts of nature which deceives the senses into forming wrong conclusions. The senses of men have too readily accepted these simulations of facts for real facts. Newton's first law says, every body tends to continue in its state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless it is acted upon by an outside force. This law was written to fit non-existent premises which were mistakenly presumed to exist. A body cannot continue its state of rest because bodies at rest do not exist in nature. Bodies are but waves of motion. When motion ceases, bodies cease to be. One might as appropriately refer to sound being at rest in silence, for sound is matter in motion, like all other bodies. A body cannot continue its uniform motion in a straight line in this radial universe of curved pressure gradients. Such a phenomena is impossible. Likewise, all bodies are continually being acted upon by two outside opposed forces, not one intermittent force. Every body in the universe is constantly in violent motion, even though it simulates rest. When motion ceases, matter ceases. A cloud floating motionlessly above the earth is moving at a speed of 1,000 miles per hour as the earth rotates. It is also moving violently in all of its parts. It is also moving in a curved line of direction, not a straight line, even though the force acting upon it is unchanging. The same thing may be said of airplanes, planets, moons, or radio waves. They all follow the curvature of gravity, pressure, gradients, because gravity is always curved. Even the lead pencil lying motionlessly upon a table cannot simulate rest except through motion so violent that your entire house would be instantly destroyed if the dual forces which cause that motion suddenly withdrew their support of it. I hereby offer the following laws which have meaning in nature to replace this meaningless first law. Every body is the result of the exertion of two opposing strains which thrust away from each other in opposite radial directions to condition its attributes and determine its motion. Every body is perpetually in motion until the strains of opposition which keep it in motion void each other in the universal zero of rest, into which all bodies disappear for reappearance in reverse polarity. Newton's third law says, to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This law is inadequate and incomplete, for it confuses the facts which govern motion. Just what does it mean? Had it been written in either of the two following ways, the confusion as to its meaning would disappear, but either one would still be incomplete. To every action, there is an equal and opposite simultaneous reaction. To every action, there is an equal and opposite sequential reaction. The inference is that the latter meaning was Newton's intent. To rewrite this law in conformity with nature's processes, Newton's third law should read as follows. Every action is simultaneously balanced by an equal and opposite reaction and is repeated sequentially in reversed polarity. That the above may be better understood by the scientist whose traditional training has fixed within his consciousness the one-way universe concept, it would be well for me to give a few familiar examples of the fundamental principle of the two-way concept which operates in every action-reaction effective motion without exception anywhere. Number 1. An outward explosion compresses in advance of the direction of the action and simultaneously evacuates in the opposite direction. The following half of the cycle is in reverse. The evacuated condition becomes a compressed one, and the compressed condition becomes an evacuated one. No better example of polarity than the above could be cited. All electric division of the indivisible equilibrium into pairs of opposite conditions takes place in this manner, and the only two conditions in the universe are the compressed plus and the expanded minus conditions, and their resultant effects of heat and cold, male and female, positive and negative, and other wave vibrating pairs of opposites. Number 2. The discharge of a revolver and its recoil are simultaneous. The sequential reaction is in reverse. That which was a discharge becomes a charge, and their directions are reversed. That which was evacuated becomes a force of gravity which compresses at its center instead of around its circumference. The concavity of outward pressures reverses to the convexity of inward pressures. Curvature of every simultaneous action-reaction is the reverse of the sequential one. The discharge of every outbreathing body, whether man or sun or electron, charges space by compressing it and simultaneously discharges the body by expanding it. The sequential action-reaction of inbreathing reverses this process. Likewise, evacuating bodies simultaneously compress, and compressing space simultaneously expands its wave-filled boundaries to balance each opposite with the other. Every outward action is an explosion which forms rings of compression at its equator. These surround a large volume of expanded space. The sequential inward reaction of this action forms a center of gravity within the expanded volume as a nucleus for a forming sphere. Every sphere thus formed explodes radially to form rings of compression at its equator, which again become sphere systems. These are the fundamentals of the constitution of matter. This underlying process of nature is present in its every action-reaction. It is the very mechanics of the universal in-breathing-out-breathing process of nature which motivates the heartbeat of the universe. It is the inside-out, outside-in turnings of space and matter which swallow each other up to born each other sequentially. This process is nature's most conspicuous fundamental. Repetition in nature is due to this process. Number 4. Every growing thing which unfolds from the invisible pattern of its seed into visible form simultaneously refolds within its seed as an invisible record of the pattern of the unfolding form. The sequential reaction reverses the inward refolding direction and repeats the outward unfolding direction of growth. Newton's hypothesis states as follows. Every particle of matter in the universe attracts every other particle with a force that varies directly as the product of the masses and inversely as the square of the distance. Science states that Newton's mathematics prove without question that matter attracts matter. This is not true. Mathematics may prove the measures and relationships of a mirage, but they do not prove that the railroad tracks do meet there. Likewise, Newton's mathematics may prove the rates of acceleration and deceleration of the opposing pressures of gravity and radiation, as masses move toward and recede from each other in their eagerness to find rest from strains and tensions of unbalance. But that does not prove that matter attracts matter. It only proves that matter seems to attract matter, just as railroad tracks seem to meet upon the horizon. It would be just as logical to assert that planets were attracted by their perihelia, because it could be mathematically proven that all planets increase their speed as they approach their perihelia. Probably pronouncing that wrong. For Newton's third law to be valid, it must apply to all motion, such as the orbits of planets, as well as to falling bodies such as the apple, which is claimed to fall because it is attracted to the earth. It must have no exceptions, and it has many. Let us consider one of them. When the apple falls toward a center of gravity, Newton adds up the product of the two masses, apple and earth, and mathematically accounts for the rate of acceleration as the two mutually attracting bodies approach each other. When a planet approaches its perihelion, however, its speed increases just as the speed of the falling apple increases. Unlike the apple which is approaching another body, however, the planet is but approaching an empty point in space, where there is no other body to add to that of the planet, such as there is when planet and apple potentials can be totaled. The planet accelerates, however, without having another body to attract it. Why has not this most obvious fact been observed long ago? Let us look at the law from another point of view. Science has found its cosmogenetic theory upon its belief that this is a one-way, discontinuous, non-compensating universe, in spite of the very obvious continuous, compensating, two-way universe manifested in all of its effects, without one single exception in all nature. Whenever nature projects any wave lever from its still fulcrum, she projects it two opposite ways simultaneously, then reverses both by withdrawing both lever extension back into their fulcrum. By withdrawing both lever extensions back into their fulcrum. This fulfills her invariable law, which decrees that all motion is born from rest, seeks two opposing points of maturity to rest, then returns as death to the zero of its beginning for rebirth. Misconceptions of weight. All freely floating bodies which are in balance with their environment have no weight whatsoever. The moment any potential is taken out of an environment of equal potential, electric strains and tensions are set up in the unbalanced mass thus removed, which measure the resistance of that to that removal. A stone, for example, is very much out of balance with an equal volume of air. The stone will fall to seek a like potential, not because it has weight as a property of itself, but because of the strains of electric polarity which divide the universal balance into equal and opposite unbalanced pairs, and insist upon keeping the universe in balance. Science believes that a man who weighs 150 pounds while surrounded by air still weighs 150 pounds when surrounded by the entirely different pressures of water in which he floats. that is not a true concept. When a man is surrounded by air, he is out of balance with polarity, which divides pressures equally. Electric tensions then act as an elastic bands, which are sufficiently stretched to register a strain of 150 pounds pull against the zero of his balance. When he is surrounded by water, however, the pressures of displacement and replacement are equalized. Each is in balance with the other, and weight disappears.